Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah, I've been out here since 2006 now. Wow, I've been here for a while.
Nice.
Jesus. I'm a Southern
My
boy now.
in-laws live in Raleigh, Cary area.
Oh yeah.
We're
Two
there.
hours. 2 hours
Yeah.
from me. Yeah. I love North Carolina. I did not think I was going when I first came out here, I was like, bro, what did I get myself into?
Yeah.
But it has grown on me. I've got two kids out here and it's home now. So
That's cool.
there
Yeah.
you go. All right, so let's dive into this show. I don't know if you had a chance to watch any episodes. Hopefully you
Yeah.
have,
Yeah.
but not a predecessor. Man, we're just gonna have a conversation. I like to get to know the people who come on here. I want to know what makes you tick. This is a conversation, so don't sales pitch me. Don't give me any cliche
Not at
nonsense.
all. Yeah.
I just want to hear from you, man. Like all of my listeners are entrepreneurs, and every episode we've put out, people send me messages. Dude, I love that piece on that guy. I love that piece of knowledge. Just I never thought about it this way. So let your brilliance shine. Yeah.
Great. No, I love giving, advice, point of view, anything PR wise. So yeah,
Cool,
I'm up
cool,
for it.
cool. All right, so I'll just do a quick intro on you, and then I've got all of your information. So thank you for taking the time to send that in. I really appreciate
Yeah.
that. Anyhow, so welcome back to the Branding Laboratory. I am your host, Devo, and we're going to break down the science of storytelling and mix in a little art, a dash of strategy, and a whole lot of personality to uncover what makes brands truly stand out. And this isn't your typical branding podcast. We're here to spark ideas. We're going to dig into the why behind the wow and have a little fun while we're at it. Grab your favorite drink. I got water right now in front of me. Get comfortable and let's dive into the good stuff. But before you do that, make sure you subscribe, hit the channel, share this with somebody you think that might find it valuable because I guarantee there's going to be a lot of nuggets that my next guest is about to drop so that I can continue to bring on some amazing people like my next guest, Matt Kovacs. And today we're going to be diving into the dynamic world of public relations and storytelling, branding strategy with an industry leader. Matt, you have been an agency owner for over 2 decades across
It is
multiple
now.
industries. Man,
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Thanks.
And I did some advanced recon on you. You have a really stellar reputation for turning brands into household names, and you're harnessing the power of innovative media relations and influencer marketing. And I'm just excited to have a conversation with you. So welcome to the Brand Laboratory, brother.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it and looking forward to chatting.
Yeah, so I guess my first thing I always like to know, and this is like a standard for the show, and then we go down the rabbit hole, is I like to know everybody's origin story. And so I
Yeah.
want to start at the beginning. What led you to the world of PR? What was that moment, that epiphany that you realized this is the field where you could truly make an impact?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to start because it's my background. Grew up in Pittsburgh, went to USC, graduated, wanted to go to the West Coast, and then it's the exactly fight on. And then I got to Chicago, got to Boston, so worked, dabbled in PR, and it was more marketing. But then as you go and you learn, and that was I was gravitating more towards connecting to that sort of old school media approach. Again, when I was in Chicago, it was a sports marketing, sports PR firm. And it was at the time where your friends were the reporters. You hung out at the bars, you pitched some stories, like you were able to have that type of connection. And that was something that really, I think really worked well for my skill set. And then worked on the client side. So worked at Levi's and worked at Lids and was a part of that. So you're able to tell stories and be able to connect and you're able to have those come to fruition in the form of be it broadcast articles, whatever. And then as I made my way back to the West Coast, that was where I wanted to be, was in that sort of agency side where you're for my own personal ADD, where you have every day is different. You have different
Yeah.
clients, different industries. And we're a lifestyle agency, but we have clients run the gambit from energy drinks through lithium mining companies. So you have that's they could be more opposite of approach, but you're able to tell stories, you're able to connect with different levels of journalists. And that's, I think, part of it too, through the years, how the industry's changed. When
Mm,
it was old school, you've had the five, maybe 3 to 5 TV stations in a market.
mm.
You have two print publications, you have the radio, and that was really it. And then now you have it's even broader now. Some of it's sad. One level, the LA Times is now a pamphlet. The traditional, a lot of cities now they camera pull. So the broadcast networks, you have the Fox, NBC, CBS, but they might only have a handful of actual camera guys that go out and shoot, and then the stations just pull from the same footage. So you're losing some of that, I'd say, journalistic integrity, maybe. But
Sure.
I think where I've gotten to where it's brands look to us and how your original question, it's this is where I see you get your hands dirty, you're able to tell those stories, be able to help brands. And a lot of it is it's transformed where PR used to be just brand building and that third party validation and bringing that to life. But so much of it now, because it is a digital world, so much of that PR happens online. And then it's
Yeah.
one click away for purchase. So you're able to track a little bit better than in the past of how this can affect sales and now it can help with reputation.
Yeah, I love a bunch of things you said that I'm going to try to unpack them going reverse. First of all, LA, Chicago, Pittsburgh. Why California? I'm just curious why
You
that
know, it's,
resonated with you the
I mean,
most.
you hit it there growing up. Every Saturday, you'd have dinner, and on the West Coast, you'd be able to see, obviously, Pittsburgh, you're a football family, you grew up with it, but got to see the Coliseum every Saturday watching the Trojans play. And that was I think, the
Mm.
draw and the allure to it. Also, the time, again, the late 80s, LA was such a big mark, I'd say, in society and everything. So that was a big part of wanting to be there. And then just left and fell in love with it. It was great time to be at the school. You're 3, 4, 5 years past the Olympics at the time, so
Mm.
89, and the city was vibrant, and it was just that sort of mentality. So I think that was a big draw to leave Pittsburgh. And now it's funny, Pittsburgh then was, again, as the climate has changed, Pittsburgh now is such a gray and dreary, rainy place. The time it had the hot summers and the freezing cold, big snow winters, but it was fun to get out of that. And now it's just interesting to see how when I go back, my family's still there, just the difference of, not being there for whatever, 30 years.
Yeah, it is a maximal amount of difference. I fly back to California every year as well. I still have family out there. I grew up in San Diego, Colorado, so West Coast, and then I went to college in Connecticut. Made my way back to California just because, oh my God, I was a California kid. I just
Yeah.
missed that. I just missed that culture.
Yeah,
It was like a freer way of thinking when I
of
was
course.
younger. Just like I just felt people were more innovative. When I was in Connecticut and I went to school there, not to knock anybody from New England, I just always felt so boxed in and just maybe it was just the like the place itself, but everything just felt so old and just like boxed in. I made my way back to California as well, so I love that part. In terms of storytelling, it's fascinating to me. I was doing a workshop yesterday for a local business here, and we were talking about this idea. They help develop entrepreneurs, and there was a question to me that was like, "Why me?" Like this whole imposter syndrome thing, and I was like, "Why not you?" There's never before have we had an opportunity to really tell a story to a large audience, 7.5 billion people. You can access something on social media, and if you can figure out like your core messaging that's going to make a difference for somebody, why not you?
Yeah.
So it stumped the individual at the end of the session. He came up to me and he's, I never really thought about it from that perspective. If I do have something that I'm good at and a message that I can share, and if I can reach a larger audience, even if it's just one person, why not me? And I was like, yeah, man, exactly. High five it. So, in terms of Blaze and your business and how you got started in this space, how did you figure out what that core message was, that core difference that you bring to the table as an agency owner?
Yeah, I think what's interesting, and it still resonates today, and it's something I try and teach and mentor, and really the elements around it is relationships. Growing up, my parents were school teachers, so
Mm.
you have that sort of mentality of just that connectivity with people, and I think that's really where look, we go up against it all the time with other agencies, obviously competing business, but then even just the discussions with clients. I have clients that are 7 years, 9 years, 10 years that we've been agency of record, and obviously it's the results and it's the team. But I think what I've tried to instill is that relationship element. It's good to know the people, especially now when it's transactional. We have a Zoom, we hang up, you go move on to the next thing. There's
Hmm.
not that rarely do you go and meet and sit with a client for a while, that there's not that time. And I think clients appreciate that though, with birthdays, their kids' names, what they did for the weekend. You care about stuff that really connects because so much of it's just not there anymore.
Yeah.
And that's really where I think we get a lot of kudos that there's obviously client service, but there's also that you feel a part of the team and that people can trust you and they're trusting your brand on in your hands. And so many of our clients, we're their only external spend, their only external agency. We're 12 months out of the year, we're with them. There's a number of clients where they may have a ad agency, they come in and they build a strategy and then they go away, or they do the branding and they go away, but we're in lockstep with them. And I think that's where the relationships are important because there's not always gonna be news. And the kiss of death of any agency is they say, oh, we didn't get any coverage because you didn't do anything new. And it's no, you have to create the news, you have to create that value and look for those opportunities. But there also has to be that trust that a client will say, okay, I like what you're thinking, or this stunt, or this survey that you're going to do, whatever it is, but that they'll let you go and do that to be able to create news around their brand versus just waiting for, oh, the reporter is going to call me back one day. You have to be so active. And the other thing is, which back to your first question, the shifting media landscape. You'll talk to a journalist, they're writing a story on a client, and then you find out the next day he was laid off. So like those things happen where is that story dead? Do you know the editor as well that you can still carry it through? Are there ways that it can still happen? Otherwise, if you're just being passive, that's where the industry passes you by, the clients will pass you by. It's really having that type of just mentality.
I love what you said about the relationships because it really is everything. And it's a differentiator, really, to be all things being equal. If you and I do the same things and we do some of the same things, if you're forging deeper, more emotional relationships with your clients than I am, they're going to be more inclined to side with you just because that's what people go after. They don't necessarily buy the product, they buy the person and the people that are behind it,
Yep.
right? It's really fascinating to me. One of the things that I uncover most when I'm working with early entrepreneurs is you said transactional. Everyone is so transactional based in terms of, especially if you're an early business, like just make the sale, get in there, and then move on to the next customer. But they forget this whole idea of building the relationship. What is it like? I saw a recent number of 20% more costly to find a new client than to nurture an
Yeah.
existing one, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it always fascinates me that and early entrepreneurs, and I'm going somewhere with this question as it pertains to your early trajectory. We're so excited, and I remember this. We're so excited to sell something. We had this cool idea. We launched this business, and it's dude, buy from me right now. And then as soon as someone buys from me, you say, okay, I'm done with them. I'm going to move on to the next client. But that's not the case. So early on in your career, did you suffer from that same thing, like the transaction, or was there something that sort of taught you to learn, nurture your existing clients, build relationships? Was there a faltering moment, or how did you come across that epiphany?
Yeah, I think it goes back to, and it's cliche, but again, my dad was a third grade teacher. So you
Mm,
had the, like, again, it's that type of mentality of you nurture that, it's the chemistry. When you get that sale, when you get that client, there you're now, that's part of the fold, and you don't want to lose that, and you build off of that versus moving on the next one. It's
yeah.
time consuming, and it's also, you have to a lot of elements to juggle, but it's that cliche of, I know my clients and all they're doing is probably better than my daughter's friends. So it's that
Mm,
whole thing that you don't know your daughter's friends' names. But it's that aspect of just understanding that. And yeah, are there stumbles? Sure. But I think it was something that I think that's people really appreciated. And that's when you have clients that are in that 10 years plus, that you understand all the elements and ins and outs and the warts and everything about their business and about them and about what drives them and what's going to be important to them. In our agency, we have the track record of having brands that we've worked with forever, and then they get acquired. And that's part of it. You help to build that, those entrepreneurs that they start, and it's two people running the stores and selling their
mm,
products, and then eventually they sell for 500 million. And you're like, yeah, you're part of that story, and you were in that aspect. I think that's an important factor of those relationships than just, hey, here's your activity report for the month.
mm,
Here's that, and that's that people trust you. There's a story of a client that you came in, you gave the phone book size flip book of, hey, here was the past 6 months, and he just threw it right in the trash. He's like,
mm,
that's great. What are we doing next?
mm.
You're like, okay, that's something like, okay, you always have to be thinking and presenting that and making sure that they're aware that you're not resting on your laurels. There's a relationship that they trust you. And I think he probably thought of that. Knowing him, he probably made this grand story that he was going to make this impact of in front of everyone of managing his agencies. But it's a way that you can understand that it's always what's the next thing. But that's where I think the relationship can really carry it.
Yeah, I love that. As an agency owner, you become part of the team with whomever you're working with. So it's really important to have that trust. And because when you are part of the team, whoever the CEO is or the leadership of the organization you're working with, they view you as a team member. And so they're going to rely upon you to be able to fill whatever void that they didn't hire and that they used you to hire instead. So
Yeah.
what are some of the things that you do to build trust with your clients so that you do become this reliable team member to them?
I think one of the things we do that's different than other PR agencies, I'll say, is we come in from more of a strategic and even a data set. So we do a thing called a media perception audit. So
Mm,
what we do is we flip the script and we'll interview probably within a category, maybe 20 to 30 media. And that's a good cross section of all different levels. But we actually say, okay, here's a series of questions the client approves. We interview the media. We compensate them for their time. We honor that because we know it's valuable. But you go, what do you think of the category? What are you seeing? Because they're being pitched 100 times a day or 1,000 times a day, probably. And we want to get that data to be able to say, okay, you're in the bubble, you're the client, you're thinking this, you're about to launch or you're about to send this news out. But here's what media thinks. And it can validate what they think, but also you might be thinking you're going this way, but the media is saying, no, this is where you need to be. If you're science-based, double down on it. Don't try and be cute. Don't try and be afraid of it. And that type of element, a lot of agencies will come in and just say, cool, we're going to pitch it. We'll get you on page 6. We'll get you mentioned. They're thinking more about just the clip and the coverage versus the impact of what that media can do. And I think that's a differentiator we do. To your point, that's where it connects on that the C-suite. We're like, okay, there's data, there's thinking, there's more of an approach versus just the PR is just spray and pray. We put the
yeah.
release on the wire, we hope something happened. It's much more strategic in that regard. And then we build off of it and are able to come back and validate it. And in so many of our clients, the CMO, the VP of marketing, they want that to say, okay, here's what we're seeing reputation wise. Before we started the campaign, we had a whatever, 40% recognition. Now we're up to 50%. Like you're able to see that growth and the data behind it. And so much of it's trackable now, which is great. Back in the day, you weren't able to track as much. It was more of it felt good. But yes, the article got out there. You saw it. Everyone, shared it, or they called the people, oh, I saw your article. Now you can say, look, here's how many people clicked it. Here's how many times it was shared. Here's the social play. There's much more data driven that way. That's why we added in this other factors and expanded on it. So we can say, yeah, here's the build of this data and why it worked.
Mm. That's very innovative. Those interviews that you're doing. One of the things that you said I really liked is you're always adding value at every step of the way. So this trust is earned. Like in terms of your partnership capacity with your ideal client, you're constantly adding value. You're constantly showing the results instead of just like checking ticks off a box. I hired a marketing company about 10 years ago when I was trying to figure out. I was at a crossroads with my business, and I started a photography agency back in 2006, and I still own that, but I really wanted something bigger than just taking photography, like a different way to tell that story, which is how I got to where I am now. But anyhow, I hired an agency to help me, and they were a marketing agency to come in and help me figure out what my core competencies were and how I could best add value. And I did I was with, after, I guess maybe 6 months, I just decided I hadn't seen anything happen. It was hard to get in touch with people. Everything was just really standard, boring material they were putting across. And just being able to have a conversation with the CEO was like literally pulling out my own teeth. And so it really honed in on the point when whatever it was I was going to do, I was always going to make sure that we were accessible, that we're always adding value, that we are always being innovative, that we're always keeping our eyes on the prize and being adaptive and nimble and trying to figure out how can we best serve, not from the orders we took when we started, but how do we get to the point we want to achieve and beyond. So in terms of Blaze, when you first started the organization, you had this idea of what we're going to do and how we're going to add value. Have you seen that evolve over the 20 years you've been in business? And in what ways has that evolved for the better?
Yeah, it's 100%. I think it's evolved. It's evolved internally, but also externally, just how, the world has evolved. I
Mm.
think also the thing when you first start that and you're trying to instill that into your team and find the right people that'll feel that same way, that's been a big part of it. And I think we've seen over the past probably like 5 years where I have a really good core team. They've had that same sort of mentality of service and really making sure that we're part of those aspects. We won this week the PR Week best places to work for a small agency size, which is nice. We're part of those 5 or 6. I know that's my only
Whoop, whoop.
bag because it talks about the culture. I think that's part of what we do, and that's where you see it. And I think clients, and again, back to Zoom, when we're meeting clients or prospects or even our current clients, you're seeing the whole team. They see how we all work together and act and know each other, and we're able to go off each other's skill sets. We complement each other. We're also the client can understand, okay, who's going to give me the strategic play, what's the best PR play, all those elements. I think that's where it's really evolved, where there is the value. And I think to your point, like that's one of the things that we talked about in the very beginning, because most of us came from the larger multinational firms where it's a whole chain of command. And if you have a question, you call your account rep, who then has to call the pitch team, who has to call this one. Sometimes the CEO just wants to text and say, "Hey, what's going on? What I need to know what's happening, why this, that, or the other thing." You want to have that dialogue, but also you want to have the answers. The last thing I want is if someone calls me and they say, "Hey, what's the latest on this?" And I go, "I don't know. I got to find someone else." But it's knowing those things. It's that team approach. Obviously, there's levels and layers within the agency through the growth, but it's the fact that we can have that awareness and be able to have that trust. Back to that point that the client knows they're thinking about me, they have it. And even some of the elements I try and instill, and I get it, not everyone is probably as nerdy or as obsessed as I can be, but a lot of our brands are sold in stores. So I'll go to if I'm in a new city, if I'm wherever, I'll go to the store, you check, see, are they on the shelves? Are they beat up? Are they broken glass? Whatever it is you want, and then report back, hey, CEO, I'm in my Buc-ee's in Texas. Look, here's your wall of product. And they love that because I care that I took the time out of my day to go and look and check out. And we have a convenience store client. So then when I go to the convenience stores, they love, oh, what did you see? What were they doing? How are those people? You're able to be beyond just the PR aspects of it, of did you get coverage? It's more about, I'm thinking about your brand holistically and things that I see and bring it to life. And that's what you try and instill in people. That's where it's that approach that if the team can see and feel that as well, then they get it. And then it's a bigger conversation with a reporter because you got to connect with the reporter on so many levels. And just, oh, you live in Charlotte. Have you been to Speedway? Have you done this? Have you gone check this one? Hey, you have a limited edition flavor in your market. Can go check it out. So the more you can localize it, then the reporters, wow, someone's actually listening to me and I'm connecting with him than just, hey, I sent you this, you should write about it.
I love that. What I heard you say earlier in the conversation is this whole idea about you're industry agnostic, and I don't think you use those terms. That's just something I put together. But you are industry agnostic in who you work with. Rather than focusing on a niche, you're focusing on a competency that you're passionate about delivering and solving a problem. And one of the things that I run into all the time, whether you're working with coaches or you're watching self-help advice, is people are always like encouraging you to to niche down. And I've always buffered up against that because I never liked the idea of niching down because it boxed me in. I can add value to a large range of people,
Yeah.
dentists, doctors, coaches, at their branding agencies. And so I've always thought, like, why would I niche down? Why don't I become the niche? So it sounds like you're already doing that sort of thing. How does one, this is like a startup question, how does one figure out if you were doing this all over again and I said, okay, I need you to go build a new business for me?
Yeah.
How does one, as an early entrepreneur, little funding, little experience, not really sure where to go in the world, how does one really figure out what they're passionate about, what their purpose driven idea is, and how do they get that into the marketplace? If you had to start over, what would you tell someone to do?
It's interesting because I think that by trade, I think I would again back in my day, I was just sports PR. So you were only dealing with in the sports industries, and to that point, you were limited. You only knew a certain amount of reporters. You only had a certain amount of seasonality as the different leagues and teams and everything. And I think why I gravitated this way was I think that the natural urge to be able to tell a broader story and to be able to bring that to life more. And I think that that's how I would look at it: is what are you into? What makes sense? We look at it. We don't take every piece of business, obviously, because not everything's newsworthy and not everything's we think we could actually have success with it. We want to make sure that we're set up for success. I think it's also why PR works so many times is that you want to be able to have something that you care about and you get passionate about. And I think that's where, if you start to the very beginning, what's going to drive the passion so that you wake up every day and I'm going to pitch this. I'm excited about this. So we have a big media event today. There's a partnership we put together and it's finally going to be spread out into the world. I think those are things that I would look at if I was starting it again to make sure that I'm going to have that same feeling.
Mm.
Because if you get to your point, get niche down, or if you get limited, then you're stuck. And back to
Boxed.
the media is changing all the time. So those 20 media I knew, half them retire, half them get laid off, or they're freelancers now. So now you're just stuck in that world. And we had a call a couple days ago with a prospect, and they said, "Oh, you only do like food brands." And we were like, "No, we do." And that's the story we tell. We have from lithium mining through retail, et cetera, because that's such a broader swath of media. And it gives us the opportunity to find and unearth opportunities that maybe you as a brand in the food space, the retail media would be interested in what you think. The packaging media would care. There's so many different layers to it that brings it to life because consumers are so spread out and fractured already that this gives them the opportunity to find you in different ways. And I think that's where I would look at it again. If you look at it all over again, how you want to be able to craft that so you get that same feeling. And I think that's
Mm.
something that's important because as people join us, new team members and even clients, they want to have that same energy and excitement and not
Sure.
feel like, oh, it's another day. I got to pitch you again. Oh, here's my weekly call. And it becomes this drag where versus we're like, we like to have high energy. We want to talk to people. We want to make sure they feel it. And what's great is when in those relationships, when clients give you that feedback, hey, just so you know, we were talking about what you guys did on this campaign, and everyone's super excited. I know we replied back and said, great job, but you don't understand how big this was. I had people in other industries call me because they saw the news. That's crack to us. When we hear that, that's like addicting of like, oh my God, that's what we want people to feel in here. And I think that's where we look at it of what we look and strive to do every day.
Mm. You mentioned lithium mining. I think
Yes.
I just saw, is it Western North Carolina where we had the hurricane come flying through up in our mountains?
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like the largest cobalt
Yep.
or lithium mine in the world. It's like the only.
Yeah.
Are you in that space? You operate in that as
Yeah,
well?
we have in the Salton Sea out in the Coachella Valley, Palm
Hmm,
Springs
hmm,
area.
hmm.
We have a client there that does lithium mining. So they're basically it was we got them on 60 Minutes through it. Basically, they're extracting the lithium through in the Salton Sea through that area, and then that's another one. It's like the California Gold Rush again, but it's through
Mm,
lithium. You're having
mm.
this element, so it's another PR play that where it's sustainability, it's about the future, all those elements versus just here's another new flavor of chip.
high level before I go into my next segment, which is I want to talk a little bit about your personal philosophy and how that intersects with your business. Tell me what you do because you're at the intersection of branding and PR, which is what I love about you. You understand the idea of the message and how important that is, and then you help people create these clear strategic messaging platforms so that you can blow them up for a larger audience. But tell me exactly who is your ideal client that you love to work with, and
Yeah.
specifically what you do for them.
So we talk about we like the challenger brands. So again, and it could be an entrepreneur, but also someone that's maybe that 4, 5, 6, 7 in their category, where they're going to work a little harder. Their budgets have to be a little more creative. So we need to be able to be a little more nimble, and that they're not afraid to take some chances and do some things that are a little different because they need to make a bigger impact, and they need to be able to showcase to retailers, buyers, even consumers that they're different. It has to be a way that they can break through. Think also that we like that entrepreneurial spirit where we have direct access to decision makers, the CEO, the C-suite, people that have skin in the game. So you're having a deeper conversation than if it's just here's the marketing manager
Mm.
that reports to a director who reports to this. So you're dealing with all these layers because if that person goes away, I don't have relationships and I
For
don't
sure.
have those aspects. And you also want to make sure not that it's about taking credit, but it's about showcasing what's being done part as a partner and as part of the whole, we're the external agency. We can't just be, oh, what's Blaze? Some CFO saying, what's Blaze? What is this? Why are we paying them? Who are these people? I want everyone to know who we are. It's having that voice. And that's a big part of the types of brands we like to work on. And we like to grow with them. We have a number of brands, and I talked about earlier that they were baby brands started in someone's kitchen and then they were acquired by Pepsi. We grew with them all that time that we were able to see and be a part of that, and that you're at that table. And again, their pain points become your pain points. How do you solve those problems? That's a big part of I think what we do. And it's also we're positioned really as a senior boutique. Our team, everyone has that, 5 to 7 years plus experience that are the day-to-days and that they're working it in that regard so that we're problem solvers. You're not going to hear us say, oh, no one covered it. We don't know what to do next. It's more about, okay, here's the feedback we got, the audit we do. Here's where we're seeing coverage. Here's what we think. Would you be comfortable if we take this approach? Giving options for a client, I think is invaluable. They feel a part of the process then. A lot of what we talk about too is that in PR, while we're marketing and doing stuff, we're also educating the client
Mm.
because they're not living it every day where this Forbes had a walkout yesterday and there's a lot of layoffs that are supposed to happen. When we see those things, that's scary for us because that's less reporters, less options, less media. And the joke is it eventually going to be the AI PR agency is going to pitch the AI reporter and you're just going to have these AI articles. Like, that's where we feel like, again, there's the human touch that you still need in these aspects that make sense, but it's also being able to grow those things. And that's that type of client that I think really works for us, that they understand and they feel, again, they're part of it, but they're also learning.
I wasn't going to go down this rabbit hole, but
Yeah.
now I am. AI.
Yeah.
Where are we going with this? Everyone's asking me every day. I get DMs from people. What's the role of AI in my business? What are your thoughts on this? Where do you think is
I
happening?
think so. It's again, there's times where I think it's great for us. Obviously, we're able to use it for, hey, here's a release we wrote. You can feed it into AI and it can give you feedback and thoughts and maybe plus it up and all that stuff. I don't think that we're at a place where it's going to replace what we do because I think there is that connection. You still need because if you said go on ChatGPT, hey, write a press release for the launch of this new beverage, it's going to create the most, all the word choices. It's like a thesaurus that they're just doing mad libs of stuff. And a lot of times it doesn't make sense. And then if you give that to a client or reporter, they would just laugh at you. So there's still the nuance of it needs to tell a story. And I don't think AI has gotten there yet. AI can put a picture together, but it's all jumbled, much like when you see the AI images they create. It's also that way in the language sometimes. I think that there's ways that it works for our business from that regard, but it still can't figure out if I said, hey, give me the top Charlotte newspapers that we should pitch. What we found, because we've tested this, because we subscribe to a number of the services that give us all the reporters and the media and all that, but it'll make up media. It'll say the Charlotte Times is the
Mm,
best paper, and Dave Smith is the top business reporter. These things don't exist, but they're telling you a story of if you were to pitch the New York Times or a journalist that way. So I think in our world, it's a little clunky in the PR and the sort of media side. Again, is it learning tenfold every minute? Yes. So I think will it get there? Probably, but I think there's still an aspect of where you need the human sides on both sides, the media
mm.
covering it and the PR side doing it.
Yeah, I agree with you. Speaking of Charlotte Times, the Charlotte Tribune, I didn't realize how diminished newspapers had become. I used
Oh
to
yeah.
deliver newspapers when I was a
Yeah,
kid.
me
You
too.
remember the big
Yeah,
Sunday newspaper that was like
of
you had to
course. Yeah.
walk it. You couldn't throw that from your bike. You had to walk it
Oh,
up to the porch.
yes.
I was
Yep.
in the grocery store the other day and they sell the newspaper right as you're walking out from the checkout. And so I picked up the Sunday newspaper and man, it was that thick. And I'm like,
Yeah.
what happened?
And a lot
So
of that news has been done like days ago. Like it's just all they just do it and and even the ads aren't that strong anymore. And there's so many of the paywalls. Just everyone gets their media from social media now. It's just
yeah.
such a weird time.
I was actually surprised that they even still published. I didn't even realize people still read newspapers. Anyway, switching gears, you emphasize creating clear, strategic, and I'm paraphrasing this, so don't hold me to butchering it, but strategic messaging for brands. What's your process for helping clients clarify this message, especially when they're struggling to find a focus on who they are if they don't even know? Do you have a very systematized process, or is this tailored for every client?
I think it's, well, I'd say all the above. So I think the audit we talked about earlier. So I think the audit is a big part of that. The audit gives us clarity and it validates and it goes through. On our onboarding process, we do a lot of the sit down and we like to interview all the different sort of stakeholders and try and do it individually. So it's not like, groupthink, but you want to talk to the CEO, you want to talk to the product manager, you want to talk to even the operations people. You want to get an understanding in the building what people think about their brand and where they see it. And again, how all the different touch points. And then from that, we come back with it's really probably twofold. One is the messaging doc of, okay, here is from the overarching umbrella, then here is all the other points to it that we'll go to, depending on different media outlets and different, timelines. Part two of it then leads into the timeline. Here's how we see a campaign, and we try and do them quarterly. So here's the next 90 days. Here's how we see the PR campaign being laid out.
Mm,
And so by those group interviews, you have the audit, and then you have the messaging. We're able to paint a picture that then we can present and come back and say, okay, here's where we're seeing how this is going to unfold. Because we'll understand, do you have key trade shows? Do you have key times of the year? Is it hydration season when everyone's going to the convenience store to buy waters and drinks and everything? So understanding that we're able to do that, then obviously it's back to the partnership part. The clients will say, okay, I like this. I think this works. Actually, this time of year, we're doing this. It's a way that it's that combination. And then from there, we're able to then go forward. And it's also,
mm,
we tried the other thing that there's a lot of, and I don't hear it as much anymore, but in the past, maybe about 5, 10 years ago, that agencies would say, you hire us, but we don't talk to any media until the, day 45. Because we need to know your brand. We need to do, we need to do all this research. The world moves too fast these days. From like day one, they're going to say, "What are you doing?
mm.
Where did you talk to? Where's my coverage? Where's my interview?" So we're able to do a lot of these things concurrently. While our first thing we'll do, we'll send a blanket email out to all our contacts and say, "Hey, we're working with this brand now. You may have heard of them. Here's the category. We're going to be pitching you. We're going to be in touch." But just so you're planting those seeds, and then as we're building all these strategies, we're still having engagement with media because there is low hanging fruit. A reporter might say, "Hey, I am actually about to do a story on this. Can I talk to them? Are they ready?" There's ways that you want to make sure you're bringing value
Mm.
because those things need to move forward. Because if you wait till 45 days till you talk to a reporter, that doesn't mean you're gonna have an article in 45 days. You still have to be pitching and planning that way. So now you're at day 60. So that's where it's really, again, when you look at an agency life, you need to really be investing in building that in at the same time that you're learning about the brand.
My takeaway from what you just said is that you don't necessarily play it safe. You're a bit more liberal, a bit more risky in your strategies.
Yeah,
Would you agree
yeah,
with
I
that?
would say
Yeah.
so. Yeah, because I think the conservative nature, I think sometimes you just back to that point of being passive and aggressive. If you're sitting there waiting, clients have they have their real job to do besides
Hmm.
managing an agency. They have to do this stuff in between their time. And so you want to make sure that we're bringing value, we're bringing options, we're bringing ideas to the table. And if you sit and wait and you're not, being active enough, then you're just going to be regurgitating similar things versus learning.
Hmm. In terms of adding value, I guess I want to get to know you a little bit more in terms of your values and your philosophies and the things that you believe in as it pertains to business and living your best life and all those cliche sounding terminology. What are your values? What does Blaze stand for? What does Matt stand for?
Yeah, I think Blaze that as we've done through the years, I think it is really that collaboration and that buildup of people and the mentoring and managing. I'm a big believer in that. And again, back to the school teacher parents, it's really about the education. It's about, bringing people to life that way and that they understand that there obviously people leave the company. And then you hear that people leave and then they're on jobs 2, 3, and 4 post Blaze, that we're a different animal in the way we approach it, the way we treat people, the way we even look the hybrid effect. We're in office a couple days a week, but it's fluid that way that I want to make sure that people have that work-life balance. because and especially myself, I have a daughter about to go to college. You have all those aspects that are different than maybe someone that is maybe recently married or recently engaged or whatever, that their life is a different place than ours or mine, I should say. So they need to have that freedom and be able to build in that aspect. But at the same time, they understand, okay, you got to be serious. You got to, put your head down. Let's get the work done. It's that aspect and why clients stay with us with the results, but also the relationships. And they like people, to your point. People buy people. There's a reason why we get hired. And that's where I always try and instill that, but also live that every day.
And incidentally, I just sent my first daughter off to college.
Nice.
It
We
was
don't know
one
where
of
yet.
the
We will
she,
learn. Yeah.
she goes to UNCW. It was, I have to tell you, outside of the birth, which was just a surreal moment for me,
Yeah.
it was probably the second most surreal experience I've ever had as a father. Like getting in it was like getting in the car, and then suddenly I just sat there. I didn't even drive off right away. I was like, am I literally leaving my 18-year-old kid who I've never been apart from for 18 years? I'm actually going to drive and be away from her. It was
Hey,
insane to me.
yeah.
I never felt this rush of emotion since the day she was born. So good luck
I,
to you. If you
I
need some
know.
advice, let me know.
I will reach out because I know it's coming. That's the same feeling I know I'm going to have. Yeah.
Yeah, I hope she stays close to home. That was my one request. I was like, I will pay for school, but you need to be within driving distance. When I went to college, I went all the way across from California to Connecticut, and I was like, I'm not going to do it with my kids. So that's my only piece of advice I have. Keep close enough and accessible.
Yes.
I love what you said earlier. We don't work with everybody. You've reached a point in your business where you're able to be discerning enough to decide if this is the right fit for you. What let's say all things being equal and
Yeah.
on the list the metrics line up, this is that they meet our, what you called earlier, a senior challenging brand, senior boutique model. They have the metrics. What would be a philosophical reason why you would choose not to work with that brand?
I think what we've learned, and this has happened recently, is when you get to that point, it's how they are, again, on the human level, how they deal with each other, how they are. The last thing you want is to have just a really shitty client. And just you can tell the relationships and how they're going to treat junior people. Like on the Zoom, do they only talk to me? Do they not talk
Mm,
to the whole team? Do they not acknowledge people? Do they
mm,
not understand that? Can you feel that there's going to be like their all their hope and dreams are in this hiring an agency and thinking that they're going to be able to retire next year? There's the realism and also what their goals are. And then also, as we dig deeper, while we're in the process of pitching business and looking to bring clients on, the more research we're doing on the back end to learn more about the people, what they do, what their brand is. There's a number of times, again, probably, I'll say handful, not a number, handful of times where you dig deeper and you find out, okay, these people, have they, declared bankruptcy 5 times? Have you seen that they've been arrested for stuff? Like you learn about people, and obviously there's the redemption and again where we live in a society and especially in the US where everyone loves that second chance, but if people aren't upfront about it or if they deny it or decline it, or that's where it can be weird and you're like, okay, I feel like this is going to happen to us in general. And then we still look to see, hey, are they ask the can we meet your other agencies, can we talk about what you're like to work with?
mm.
They'll ask for our references, we want to ask for references for them as
I love
well.
that.
And if you find out, oh, they're slow payers, they're gonna nickel and dime. They're gonna find out you're gonna find out they pay at the last day possible. And not that bad, but you learn through those conversations you have because agencies have dealt with it ahead of you. So I think those are some of the things we do. There's no right or wrong answer. Some of it's just gut. Hey, it feels good, but then we do our post-mortem after the pitch, and people are like, yeah, it felt good, but I don't know. I feel like they really want to get in the Wall Street Journal, and the Wall Street Journal doesn't cover this. There's things where you can see, and that's why I try and get everyone's opinions through this because it is a team effort. And we take the business, and I had two people that said, "Oh, this can be horrible," and then it's horrible. Yeah, they're going to do. I told you so. And is their heart going to be into it? So that's why I want to make sure that everyone feels good about it as well.
I love that idea of getting vendor references. I never thought about that. I'm going to steal that from you. I
Yeah,
should have.
no,
I had an experience about a year ago with a client who I should have everything lined up metric wise. Like this
yeah.
feels good. Had a bunch of really cool meetings with them. I won't go into all the details because it's boring, but they were not good at making their payments. And so it was like come on, man. Like we did the service for you. You loved everything we've given you. Like now you're just gonna. So anyway, I'm gonna get that. I like that
But
idea.
it is a fair question to ask. Hey, can we talk to, because you'll know who their other agencies are. And then it doesn't have to be a deep conversation. It's like, hey, can I have 5 minutes? I want to learn. Hey, we're pitching this. We'd love to learn more. Because
Mhm,
hey, you're probably going to work with them eventually if you win the business. So you want to
mhm.
know your partners as well. So
Yeah.
please
Yeah,
take it.
in a collaborative capacity,
Yeah.
absolutely. So
Yeah.
I've never actually thought about that. It's genius. Well done. Do companies give any pushback on that?
We have, sure. We've had
Uh-huh.
that some, I don't know about that. Let me ask. But many times you can find out who it is pretty easily. You just Google brand X, the PR agency, ad agency, whatever, or even on LinkedIn, you'll be able to find someone. And most times you can get someone that'll talk about it because it's not, I'm not asking for trade secrets. It's, hey, do you work with this brand? Yes, we do. Do you like them? Yes. Okay, we're pitching them. We're in the running. We might work with you. It's more of, I think, fact finding, and it's a fair way to go about.
Mm. I really like that idea. I'm gonna totally steal that. Dude, you're an old goat in the PR field. You've been doing this for 2 decades now. How do you stay motivated? How do you stay passionate about everything that you're doing on a daily basis?
I think that part of it is the brands you work with. I think that those really energize and are exciting to work on, and it's fun to be a part of that. I think obviously the team. I think I have a great team. I think being a part of that and you feel motivated and you want to be able to help them grow as well. So I think those are things that have been interesting, and it changed. You have obviously with the pandemic, there was so many different changes that happened there, and then with AI now. So there's always this movement, and I tell the story of I talked about Chicago. You're pitching a reporter, you're hanging out with them at the bars. You knew those reporters. Then it became bloggers. Then it was media bloggers. And then, oh, there's this thing called social media and there's like influencers. And now it's the micro nano, all that type of stuff. And now it's AI and everything's spread out wherever. So I think that's been interesting to have be a part of an industry that changes so much, but you still see the value at the end of the day when you get the TV station, you get two, three camera crews to show up and you're able to tell a story. I think those things that are interesting to be a part of, and that's what really energizes me.
And running an agency and just being an entrepreneur in general, a small business, and you're a small business, I'm
Yeah.
assuming, it's a squiggly line. Like the trajectory is not a straight limiting line. And I always think that people, when you first get into business, they think it's going to be like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to get here. It's like that. And I always tell people, man, like it is a lot of speed bumps. There's a lot of startovers. There's a lot of reinventions. There's a lot of times where you have to adapt and pivot. And there's a lot of times where you just get bitch slapped across the face and you have to figure out, how do I get out of this hole right now? So
Yeah.
if you're passionate about what you do, and it's more than just passion. I'm not suggesting that if you're passionate, you're going to be automatically successful, but being passionate and loving what you do is a huge part of all of this and your success, I would assume, right? So I'm just curious, on a scale of 1 to 10, as a leader of an agency, how important is it for an entrepreneur to be very crystal clear, loving what they're doing, as opposed to just having a good idea that may or may not make sense at the amount of passion level?
I think it has to be 10 or 11 on the scale. Like it has to
Yeah.
be that passion is what really helps drive it. And it gets you through those times. Like you said, if you hit a speed bump, if you hit a wall, a client drops you out of nowhere, all that weird stuff. And look, it happens. This year has been probably one of the weirdest years with either clients that just out of nowhere, everyone gets laid off, or we had no, for months, there was like very limited people looking for to hire an agency. Everyone, and again, I think it was the election, the time of year, the economy, all those things that people are like, I don't want to spend any money until
Yeah.
I know what's going to happen. And now post-election, it's been a 180 where now we're getting calls, getting hired, all that stuff. Not about the politics. It was more about people were like, okay, I just want to get through this.
Yeah.
And then now I can feel like confident that, okay, we're going to be able to move forward and be able to have that budget with us.
It's funny how the whole idea of just like an ecosystem, whether it's politics, whether it's the economy, whether whatever it is, and like the collective consciousness that sort of latches onto that and drives the nature of things. I've always just been fascinated by that.
And then the trade media, which again is supposed to be the Bible of whatever category, they're always a couple weeks behind from what the real media is doing. And then they still like that, all that does is just add fuel to that fire and it reverberates. And then
Mm.
everyone feels, okay, oh my God, our category, something's gonna happen because of X, Y, or Z. And then everyone can just take a deep breath and then we just live to fight another day.
We talked about that squiggly line and how things change really quickly. How have you changed as a CEO, as a human, as an individual over the 20 years or so in business? How have you evolved?
Yeah, I think an interesting thing is I'd say probably a much calmer. I think you look 20 years ago when you had to be the life of the party, had to be crazy over the top. You had to, again, you were trying to get attention and trying to have that aspect. I think that as you get mature and as you work through all these and go through the wars, if you will, that gives you that sense of purpose and also that you're not, there's other people that need to shine within your organization. You're able to share the spotlight or give them the spotlight and not feel like eyes have to be on you the whole time. I think that's a big learning. And I think it also becomes more because you're able to put more time forward in the business versus having to be always on stage.
Yeah. Humility is what I hear you saying a little bit.
That too, 100%. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
so much of my team that I love to just pump them up and talk about the great work they're doing.
Hmm.
Because I think that's something that I think the younger millennials and probably Gen Z, they're not used to that, or they're not used to hearing those types of affirmations on a business sense.
Hmm.
Obviously, you're growing up, they probably got too much of it with everyone getting a ribbon and a trophy. But I think at the work side, they need to feel like, okay, this what you did had an impact, and we
Hmm.
can hear from the client, but it also you should understand that that's do more of those things. Whatever you were able to pull off, keep doing that.
I don't think that is something that is spotlighted enough. If you've been in business for 20 years and you've been hiring people for 20 years, the personality differentiation over the last 20 years has changed exponentially, right?
Yeah.
So I'm a small team. I have a small group of people, and I have some younger employees and some older employees, and it's blaring right in the face the different types of subtleties and nuances that come in with the generations of the employees. How have you learned to manage that? Let me back up. What are some of the biggest things that you've seen in that shift over 20 years, and how have you been able to stay nimble enough to evolve with it?
I think having a daughter that's in that age group is helpful because she'll be 18 in February. So having seen that, I think what's interesting was the millennials were such a weird time because it's still you're 2010, 2011, and you were interviewing people that, and I have two different stories. One was that the one person I was interviewing, her dad was in the parking lot, and she's like, "Hey, can you talk to my dad?" I'm like, "No, I'm interviewing you." And then the other one was someone's parent. I can't remember if it was a mom or a dad, but they were emailing me like trying to negotiate the job offer.
I love it.
That was that millennial mindset where the parents were probably too overreaching, and at the same time but they were more educated. More the internet was obviously the social media was just starting, and they were so invested in it. And then I think now it's been great to see again post pandemic the Gen Zs of the world, again, I'll include my daughter and your daughter, but just that it feels like they're more, again, it feels more back to maybe when we came out of school in those aspects. Like they're more, I'd say, street level, they're more grounded. I think they work a little harder. There's a different approach and mentality. And I think they're teaching, it's that reverse mentoring that I think they're teaching a lot of us, myself included, that you're able to see and feel from that as well, where I think that's been important to, as managers, and what I try and teach my other, directors and VPs, we got to tap into that. We can't be the old curmudgeon. Back in my day, this is what it was. We have to be able to evolve because the client doesn't want to hear that. A client doesn't want to hear what it was like in the 90s. They want to hear, okay, what are we doing right now? How can we
Hmm.
make this happen? Because a lot of those people in the 90s, they're not doing what they were doing then on the media side. So that's why
Yeah.
I think that we've seen and learned that.
Reverse mentoring, it's great. You have to be able to receive feedback, especially there's an opportunity to learn from regardless, whatever the situation or the age gap, but there's always an opportunity to learn. I learned that about my children, and I didn't realize that early on. I came from a very structured, highly conservative, very rigid parenting background. My father was like, it was his way or the highway type of thing. In fact, that's what he said every 3 or 4 words. And so I adopted that model early on. I thought that was the way to parent, that was the successful way. But I realized very quickly that that's way too rigid, but there are so many opportunities to learn from your children because they have this fresh perspective and this fresh viewpoint on things, unfettered, untapped in terms of like corruption and whatnot. It's just able to really get feedback on that. So it's great that you found out about that. All right, we're coming to the end of the show. So I really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. In terms of Blaze PR, what's the legacy? And I don't mean that from a vanity perspective, but what's the legacy when you decide to sell the company or hang it up and pass it on to your daughter or whomever? What's the legacy you hope that you have fulfilled in the time being that you ran this company?
I think within Blaze, I think the way we look at it, or I look at it, is that we did really good work, that we were able to create a value for brands, and that at the end of the day, that this was it's a service industry, and that we were able to fulfill that promise, and that and again, I'm always of that mindset that we didn't, again, take anyone's money and didn't do the work. Like we really feel like we do that, and it's that blue collar, probably Pittsburgh mentality of I'm getting paid for a job in that service, and that we did it, and that we were able to have that success, and that's I think those track records we have. We're at I think 4 clients now that we started with them, and then they got acquired by bigger, be it Pepsi, Coke, Campbell's Soup, like larger conglomerates bought these brands that we were able to help pump up. And that makes us feel good that our work has value in that regard. Because so much of it, from a PR standpoint, if you look at the marketing matrix, that 360, PR was always like that smaller little thing. Oh,
Mm,
yeah. And then we have a PR, we have an agency, a publicist that does stuff. PR's piece of the pie is getting bigger and bigger in
mm,
what we do. And I think that's an important aspect. And we've been happy, and I'm happy that we've been a part of that journey.
I like that. Like Permanente Brothers, that's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
Pittsburgh. The
Of
French
course,
fry
Permane Brothers.
pizza. Yeah, I was trying to early in the
Coleslaw,
conversation. I was
hash
trying to
and
think about
town,
that. Yeah, I was trying to think about
Permane
that
Brothers.
restaurant.
Yeah,
I, I
exactly.
I used to have a friend who lived in Pittsburgh. I used to work in the corporate world, and Pittsburgh was one of our office centers, and I used to go to
Right.
Pittsburgh all the time. Wonderful food there, by the way.
That is. When I see what's funny, when I grew up, there was no culture. This was the dying steel town and all that type of stuff. Like Pizza Hut would win best Italian restaurant every year. Now it has chefs. It has a whole different.
Oh
It's a whole
yeah.
different city than when I grew up. But what's great is there's a Permane Brothers right in the airport, so I can
Oh, is
wait.
that right?
My dad, like no one wants to eat Permane Brothers if you live there as much. Like it's there, so you do it. But coming home when I leave to come back to the West Coast, you got to get there early and go to Permane Brothers. Yeah.
My fun Pittsburgh story I'd like to share with you. I was in the Pittsburgh airport, and it was like one of the stores, and it was a music store where you buy music, and I was thinking I was buying some headphones or something, forget for the long flight back to San Diego, and standing right in front of me was Franco Harris.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it was standing right in front of me, and I'm not like a celebrity guy. It's a big deal,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
and so I just looked up at him. I was like, I know who you are, and I was like, you're Franco. He's yeah, man. He was super cool. Shook my
Yeah.
hand, wanted to know what I was doing. He was like really humble, wasn't like
Yep.
ostentatious. Anyway, that's my one Pittsburgh story. All right, one final piece of advice, last question, and then I'll let you get about your way. If most of my listeners are entrepreneurs, early business entrepreneurs to be precise, if you had to give one piece of advice to anybody just beginning their journey, what would that be?
I think trust your gut. At the end of the day, it's your gut, it's your reputation, it's everything about it that you need to feel confident because that'll carry you a long way. Because if you waver, if you're not sure, it's going to come across in so many different ways. And I think that's something I've learned through the years.
Hmm. What does that feel like to you? I always wonder what that feels like. Is it different for everybody? The whole trust your gut? Like when you
Yeah,
have that
yeah, yeah.
intuition about something, what does that feel like to you?
I think for me, again, we've done a lot of those, the Colby tests, all those, the
Yeah.
Myers-Briggs. I'm a quick start. So I'm the first one to say, yes, let's do it. Or like
Mm.
half of my team is like fact finders.
Mm.
And the client will say, hey, like, should we do this, do that? I'm like, yeah, we're going to do it. Let's do it. And then the call ends and half my team will go, why'd you say that? No, we can do this. It's about that confidence. You need to, you always should be selling. It's the Glengarry, Glen Ross. You always got to be closing because the client trusts you and they need to feel that confidence. And if you don't have
Mm.
the confidence in it, say, let us get back to you. Let us do a report. Let us do a deep dive. It delays and it feels wishy-washy. And I think
For sure.
wishy-washy is what really can hurt relationships because they're like, are they gonna be able to do it? Do you trust it? And again, you can come back and say, hey, here's what we're gonna do. Here's the 5 things. And maybe one of those things is from that original idea, but that confidence and being able to trust your gut and to know that you can do it. I think that's a big part of it. And that's back in the agency world where having that type of trust is an important factor.
That's a really good point. Whether you say fake it till you make it or whatever you want to call it, you are in a position of leadership. And if you're selling a service to somebody and I'm buying from you, I want to know that you know what the F you're doing. Don't be wishy washy about it. Even if you haven't figured it out yet, at least have some sort of sensibility around this is how we think we're going to approach it. And backing away from it is going to make me lose trust right away. So that's a really good point. Man, Matt, I really appreciate the conversation. It was a lot of cool value that you dropped, and I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy day to join us on the laboratory today.
Thank you. It was great. Great meeting you, and I loved it. It was fun.
And where's the best way people can find you if they want to connect with you?
Probably blazepr.com. Easy
Okay.
enough.
Okay. And we'll drop all of your handles, all of your
Cool.
website, all of your links in the notes below when we publish the show. So thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, today's episode with Matt and just learning a little bit about him and his journey from PR visionary to industry leader and how Blaze PR continues to help brands, industry agnostic brands, connect with their audiences in meaningful ways and learning a little bit about his philosophies and his values and all the things that make him and his company tick. Just a really cool conversation. I love candid conversations like this where people are not afraid to spill the beans and pull back the covers a little bit. So if you want to learn more about Matt and Blaze PR, you can visit their website. The links are in the show notes below. He's on LinkedIn as well. I found him on social media. Just a great dude to connect with, and he's very responsive. So, to our listeners, don't forget to subscribe to the Branding Laboratory. Leave us a review. We're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're all over the place. So, leave us a review and share this episode with someone who's ready to elevate their brand. And if you are ready to tell your story in a way that truly resonates, let's connect. I'd love to learn a little bit about what you're doing as an entrepreneur, what you're doing with your business, and how we might be able to help you because that's what we do. We help you tell your story. So, I'm Devo, and this has been a fantastic conversation on the Brand Laboratory. Until next time, keep building something impactful, and I'll see you on this side.